Hallelujah. Well, we're going to start a new subject in ethics this evening, which is very comprehensive and a very important one. That is Christian responsibility in marriage and the family. Now, this, of course, affects us where we all live. We're going to deal basically tonight with introductory matters. And then we'll be dealing with various aspects of this subject. I don't know just how, but things like parent-child relationships, husband and wife relationships, the woman's role in the church, biblical view of courtship, preparation for marriage in the family, divorce and remarriage, and all of the many, many questions involved in that. One of the most complicated subjects, I suppose there is, because it involves children and parents and husbands and wives and just people, us, in every aspect of our lives. Now, I want to deal with some introductory matters tonight because of the important nature of the subject about which we're dealing. Remember, we're making application of the biblical principles to everyday life. And we need the introductory material both because of the importance of the subject and because we need to understand some of the other things later. Now, a few remarks might be similar to some things we said under the restoration of the biblical roles of husband and wife, but we need to restate some of those things again, but I'm sure they'll be presented a little differently and some new material too. So we're going to be looking, first of all, under the heading of Christian responsibility in marriage and the family. We're going to be looking, first of all, at some trends in American family life. Trends in American family life and marriage. Now, I think we touched some of these things before, but as I say, they need to be reiterated here for obvious reasons as we go along, as introductory understanding. First of all, we're looking at trends in this regard. There is an increasing impermanence in the American family. Now, I'll take time enough for you to write whatever you want, because when we dealt with this before, I was just more or less preaching or teaching a message on it, and you probably didn't have time to get anything down. Increasing impermanence. We mean by that the families today are highly mobile, moving from community to community, from state to state, and very few of us live out our lives in the community or even state where we were born. Now, the significance of that, of course, is it upsets family ties. And it's a major factor, one of the factors at least, in divorce and juvenile delinquency. Because when the family is not permanent and not together the way it was, say, at the turn of the century, then it just increases the tendency toward divorce and children not being under the right sort of environment and discipline. Another trend is the increasing divorce rate, especially in America. We'll be dealing with that in detail later. I just want to mention it here as one of the trends that we are faced with today. Of course, that results in the breakup of the home and the family and juvenile delinquency. So the significance of mentioning that is for that reason. Then there is another trend, and that's decreasing family size. Now, all of these will be important as we deal with the various questions of divorce and remarriage and children's responsibilities to parents and all. You'll see why we're in such a mess, such a state, I started to say, but such a mess is a better word. Decreasing family size. The declining birth rate, of course, is due to birth control, which has become widespread in our generation. Increasingly so in America, of course. The pill has been responsible largely for this and other methods. The lowest rates of births are in the upper and middle income groups. The highest rate of birth is, of course, among your poor or agricultural peoples. which presents problems in itself when you're dealing with people who are having marital problems. It's one of the ways of understanding how to deal with people. Now, the significance of that, decreasing family size, is that it gives them more leisure time to get into trouble. More leisure time to party, to drink, to sin, to get involved in other pursuits other than what your calling is as a wife or a husband or as a child in a family. And that again results in divorce, juvenile delinquency. You could even call these trends causes for divorce and juvenile delinquency. Then in the fourth place, there's a loss of traditional family functions. Now, some of the older people will appreciate this more than maybe some of the younger, because in the past 25, 30 years, or even 50 years, we could almost say, things have rapidly been changing. But at one time, most all of the family functions were supplied by the family. That is, education, recreation, religious training. And we live in an age when things like that, as well as other things, where the average family doesn't think they could ever get by without specialists taking over in these fields. Paid specialists. But education, recreation, religious teaching, just, recreation. When I was growing up, we didn't have toys. I grew up during the Depression. And literally no money. You wouldn't know what it was to have a nickel. You could buy for a nickel or a dime one of those cars now that cost you $1, those little toy cars. And it never occurred to you that you'd be bored if you didn't have something to do, because you had the whole world out there. So you built dams, you dammed up water in the gutter, made boats out of cigarette packages, and airplanes out of 2 sticks, and propellers you'd whittle out with a knife, and they would really turn, by the wind. But today, children are actually at a loss unless there's a TV blaring and a room full of toys. I'm going to say something. A child shouldn't have, I don't mean that a child shouldn't have anything, some kind of a toy or so, but I should think that it be something that he or she would use. If it's a girl, a doll, and a boy, you might be surprised what he'd want to play with. Not that 1998 toy, but the 79-cent something that you'd never look at. And let him have 2 or 3 things, at least at a time. That's a whole subject in itself. But there is the loss of the traditional family functions whereby we pay specialists to educate them and to train them and to entertain them right in the church. We've got to have a religious, what do they call it? I've been away from it so long. Recreation, minister of recreation, minister of education, religious education, a minister of music, minister of recreation. So you build gyms and all sorts of entertainment. We didn't need an entertainment. We just made our own. It'd take you half a day to walk 2 miles to go swimming. Instead of 5 minutes for Mama to drive you to the Y while she watches you, or a lifeguard. And swimsuits, we didn't have the money. You didn't need them where we swam. On a mud bank in a creek that they said you shouldn't swim in because the water was contaminated, but we didn't know any better and never thought about it. Or a pond somewhere where they dug a quarry and they'd hit a spring that filled up with water, but we didn't have specialists. But it was coming, of course, in those days. And so the significance of all of the things we've been saying about the loss of traditional family functions, the significance of that, you have less family dependence today. So the family isn't close-knit. You don't depend on mother or father or grandfather to show you how to whittle something. You depend on specialists. Or you can buy a kit for $18.50 to whittle wood. Has its own knife and pieces of wood and plans and patterns. So there's less family dependence. There's less respect for adults, for parents. Because your father and mother, they're just functionaries that feed you and pay the bills. And The significance is that the people that you're turning your children over to are controlling their minds, their lives, and their beliefs. That's right. In your churches, they're getting brainwashed with denominational teaching. At school, they're getting everything from evolution to Antichrist, for the most part, and so on. Of course, we've got the highest divorce rate in the world, and we've got the highest rate in history today. And if you know some of these things, then when you're dealing with people, you can sympathize with them. Because you look at somebody like under 40 and you just know, where would you start helping this woman or this man? Because you say, have you got a couple of days? I want to give some long-run trends to explain why you're in the mess you're in. You really know, so you can help them, but you'd like, to be able to inform them, to say that the reason that you're in such a mess is because of your background, the environment you grew up in America. Then we have another long-run trend is changing morality today. Now, in our book, Every Wind of Doctrine, we deal with this in detail. Changing morality. Men and women are plunging headlong into hell. They can't seem to wait to get there. The morality is just declining at a rapid pace. Children are disrespectful to parents, to elders, and are looking for ways to get into trouble. As I just recently heard or read in Newsweek that, I heard it on the radio, and a man who was in urban development and so forth on the radio was talking about the fact that as soon as a factory or a building, an apartment or anything is closed for 1 week, then he says whole hordes and packs of teenagers come along to break the windows out. They just somehow can sense when there's nobody there functioning. And if we accidentally, in throwing a rock or shooting a slingshot, broke a window, you'd never caught any of us. We'd been so far gone, but now they would defy you to do anything. Come up and smash your window with a baseball bat in a car. A lot of that goes on. Just walk up right when you come to a red light and wham your windshield. And so we're witnessing a changing morality. There's a general preoccupation with sex, and a materialistic philosophy of life characterizes America, and of course the world, increasingly so. You can jot down what you think is important. We deal with this particular aspect in the book Every Wind of Doctrine under the new morality. But let me give you some signs that the morality of our culture is rapidly declining, which explains the breakdown of family and home life and marriage. Some signs that our morality is rapidly declining in America. For example, you've got efforts to legalize the use of drugs. Now that's almost unbelievable, but yet it's just a question of time till drug use will be legalized. Like liquor was, the prohibition couldn't stop it is the argument, so how could you stop drug use? You might as well legalize it, and then the government can get tax on it. Four-letter words are now an accepted part of our literature and culture. I mean, it's nothing to hear it on the radio, see it on the signboards, or it's a part of advertising now. Four-letter words, you know what we mean. Laws are being changed by the Supreme Court, have been already, to support pornography and immorality. You can buy off the newsstand today what a person who has been arrested for selling under the counter, even 10 years ago. I mean, you can buy it right off the newsstand. You can prove you're 18. Another, we're looking at signs. Another is the women's liberation movement, which is a female revolt. Again, that's dealt with in our book, Every Wind of Doctrine. Women's lib, female revolt. The hippie movement, that's a part of the youth rebellion, which we also deal with. Hippies, yippies, and so forth. Another sign is the corruption. Corruption is on the increase in government, industry, labor unions. Of course, when you hear the reports, it's usually somebody with a vested interest, so it's the governments that are corrupt, and someone else will say it's the industry that's corrupt, and others will say it's the labor unions, but it's all of them. And so like the leaders, like the people, because they imitate them. People in America are going to be no better than their leaders. And another indication, another sign, is the declining morality in many churches and denominations. See, it's right in the temple as it was in the Old Testament. Most churches are either accepting or looking the other way at this new morality. Some denominations are actually defending homosexuals and perverts, sex perverts and lesbians and so forth. Another sign, colleges and universities have lowered their moral standards. Sex on campus is an accepted thing in many, many areas. Faculty and students are now controlling the administration and their policies in many educational circles. Faculty and students, no longer the administration. So we are witnessing a changing morality. Then, another trend that is causing all the problem in the home and marriage and children's lives is a declining male leadership and headship. Now, anytime we talk about a subject like this, it's understood in this church, I'm sure, that we have no antagonism against women. But, in fact, we could say it another way. We could say because there is a declining male leadership and headship, it's his fault. So we're not blaming one sex. It is the fault of both. But women are gaining much freedom today, legally, politically, economically, domestically, vocally, and so on. So that has led in America, and America is leading the world in this, to a matriarchal society. Matriarchal leadership in the home and in society. The husbands have gladly surrendered their responsibilities of leadership, headship, to the point that today, and we've dealt with this in detail in other teachings, as you know, where today they gladly let the wife take all the responsibility, from the discipline of the children to the color of the car that you buy. And of course, she, because she does not have the God-given ability to function in that role, and that's dealt with thoroughly on tapes, she has a blessed role, but it's not the leadership of the home. Then it affects the children in all the ways that we've shown you before. And one of the ways is that the youth today are really running things, because the father, when he was head of the home, he kept things in order. Now that's ideally speaking, but it was still true for the most part. And the mother uses psychology, and the child today has taken over everything. I mean, literally. If you don't believe that, ask the economists and the advertisers. All advertising, most all of it is directed to the teenager. That's where the money is, because he controls the purse strings. What he wants, Mama gives him. And Daddy too, since Daddy has long since vacated his responsibility. Now, all of that is covered on the tapes, the restoration of the biblical roles of husband and wife, and in case you haven't sat under or heard that teaching, you need to hear it, because it'll open your eyes. But to show you it isn't just one man's opinion, I would invite you to make your own study. As I say on those tapes, and when I taught that, sociologists and social scientists are extremely concerned, especially in America, because all of the trouble we're experiencing, or at least most of it, is because of the breakdown of the home, the family. And to show you that it isn't one man's opinion, of the many things you could research yourself, here's just one article. I took some excerpts from it. It's from a Look magazine, a Look staff writer. And the title of the article is "The American Male. Why Do Women Dominate Him?" That was the title of the article. And it's a rather in-depth study, as much as you could have in a magazine article. And I want to read some things that social scientists are saying, sociologists, psychiatrists, and doctors and teachers and people, ministers, people who are concerned, because we and they have to deal with people. And there are no simple solutions. You just wish you could take them back to maybe pioneer days and start all over. But you can't. Now listen to some of the statements made, and of course you'd need to read, it's rather a lengthy article, read it all to get the most benefit. Scientists who study human behavior fear that the American male is now dominated by the American female. These scientists worry that in the years since the end of World War II, he has changed radically and dangerously, that he is no longer the masculine, strong-minded man who pioneered the continent and built America's greatness. His collapse already affects his wife and children, and the experts pin most of the blame for his new plight squarely on the women. Of course, the man has surrendered it. So I would, add that myself. But they're emphasizing the women here for a purpose. From the moment he is born, the American boy is ruled by women. First, hospital nurses, and then his mother dictate his every move. When he goes to school, his teachers take over, and today most of them are women. He quickly becomes accustomed to female domination. The American mother, sensitive now to the charge of momism, has developed a subtler technique for bossing her son. She gives love if he performs well, withholds it if he fails. Mother's love has become more and more conditional, according to anthropologist Dr. Margaret Mead. The mother's withholding of love has replaced the father's discipline in child training. Now this is right where you live, friends. Everything that is said here is so true that it's just like reading your own family history almost. Some scientists believe that young boys are also damaged by the increase of competition with girls today at school and play, and that it's difficult today to tell one sex from another. Girls wear blue jeans. These are not some old fogey preachers. These are social scientists. Girls wear blue jeans and short haircuts like boys. They play ball with the boys, compete with them in science classes, and join in rap sessions. Social scientists warn that today boys can be boys only from 6 to 10 years of age. Beyond these years, a boy is unsure of his maleness, torn by his mother's sometime love, afraid to fail in front of girls. Can his masculinity take it? The going steady idea seems to be clearly the girl's idea. She is imposing monogamy earlier and earlier. She controls the increasing premarital sex activity, which is quite common today among teenagers. From this game by which she controls the boy, arises the later picture of married life in America, in which it is the wife who sets the pattern of sex relations. From his mother, he has learned that if he does what she asks, she will reward him. Later, as a husband, his rewards will come when he earns a good living, fixes the screen door on Saturday, and takes his wife out. Then he gets some physical love. That's true. That is true. He's dominated from the hospital nurse right on through. And the father has abdicated his responsibility. And so there's no male figure in the home, and the boy he grows up all mixed up, and girls too, because they don't see a female figure. They see a woman with pants. Female dominance has become equally damaging when the husband turns father. In too many homes, he has been pushed out of any significant role in rearing his son. He either deserts the boy because he's too busy making a living, or confuses him because he does the same household chores as the boy's mother. Well, it is confusing, to say the least. I'm still confused when I see a man washing dishes. I'm still confused. I just can't help it. It is utterly confusing. Now, I don't mean there couldn't be occasions when that would be a help and a necessity. Obviously, that you don't set rules up on anything. A boy growing... Well, let me just add to that. I mean, if there was a reason, like the wife's gone and he has to keep the dishes down to par... So I'm not anti-dishwashing, Some of your best dishwashers in restaurants are men, but the point is obvious. We don't have to labor, do we? He confuses him because he does the same household chores as the boy's mother. A boy growing up today has little chance to observe his father in strictly masculine pursuits. A child study center in New York states that boys to grow into masculine men need to see what masculinity is like. And they're thwarted if there's no male figure around and if the female has taken over. It is the housework participating father about whom the experts have begun to worry most of all. For years, counselors have urged women to convert the father into a male version of the mother. Now they feel they've pushed him too far, that they have demasculinized him. One sociologist labels him only a mother substitute or a nursery assistant. Today's husband is required to perform housework that a man of a generation ago would have laughed at. The question is, does the American father have any role at all beyond procreation and money-making? What does he? I don't see him in any other role in the family. Now you think about that for a moment. We were in Arkansas, between our Louisiana and Texas meeting, I believe, or it doesn't matter when it was, but we were in Arkansas in a Pizza Hut. That's about all we could find, and they're pretty good. So we were there blissfully eating our pizza and salad, and in walked a typical American husband and wife with one child. He carried the baby. Now, you see, you couldn't say there's anything wrong with that in itself. Let me just finish the whole story. But he was carrying the baby. He walked in and got the high chair, put the baby in it, took the bib, put it on the baby, went up to the counter with the baby food, had it heated, went and got it, brought it back, and fed the child, and said all the things I would expect to hear out of a woman. I mean, it actually sounded like a mother. Honey, I don't know what it is you want. And even the same intonation. And it's this mother's, and he did it all. From cleaning the baby, after it messed and all, clean it. And all the time this mother substitute was busily engaged in taking care of the baby, the mother, the actual mother, dressed as a man with her pants, sat gazing upon the scene through the smoke of her chain-smoking cigarette habit she must have had, because she lit one after another, and through the haze of that she watched and observed the scene going on around her. She did nothing but sit there and puff cigarettes while he did all this work. So I'm just saying, does the American father have any role at all beyond procreation and money-making? Yes, he's a mother substitute. See, I can answer that question. He's a nursery assistant. That's the sociologist's terms. Female dominance, he continues, has resulted in increased divorce. Now listen to this. Here's the results. Female dominance has resulted in an increased divorce, impotency in man. Many men are impotent. That's right. And divorce results from that, you see. Because they're no longer men. A man can't be a man toward a woman unless he's a man. And he doesn't know what's the matter with him, but we're telling you. The sociologists know. So it's resulting in increased divorce, impotency in man, bachelorhood, 1 out of 8 now remain single, and it has resulted in an increase in homosexuality in males and lesbianism in women. Because, they're no longer men, so women don't want them, and the women are now with masculine spirits, and so they're looking for perverted relations, as Romans 1 talks about. Women seem to view their gains over men with both pleasure and contempt. And that's true. Think of man as woman, man and woman. Man is sinful enough to want to dominate. That's the inclination of the sinful heart. Man has been the leader for so long, he's glad to relinquish the responsibility and let the wife take care of it. But the wife isn't made that way, and so she has contempt for him as a result. That's what they mean by this. If you go into in-depth study in this area, you'll see it isn't a matter of religion or anything else, Christianity. These are just sociological facts. Women seem to view their gains over men with pleasure and contempt. One sociologist states we're moving toward a social structure made up of he-women and she-men. Declining male leadership, then, in the home and society is one of the major causes, we're saying, for the current breakdown in marriage and family and juvenile delinquency. Well, that's just one little article, or excerpts from one article. And as I say, it's very simple to prove that to yourself. Now we come to another aspect. We've been looking at trends. Let's look at the moment at family control, secondly. There are two types of family control. This helps you to understand, too, why the breakdown of family marriage and so forth. Two types of family control. There's formal and informal. Legal, formal, and informal family control. Let's look at the legal or formal controls. Now, in early society, controls were largely informal in the family, in society. But with the rise of cities and the complexities of civilization and so on, impersonal control, informal control, has been largely replaced with legal controls, where the state, city, state, and government controls much of your home, family, married life. Now, you may not, you see things that you live with you may not be aware of till we point them out to you. You're not as free as you think you are. What used to be informally controlled by the head of the house or the group is now controlled for you. Many examples of this. One is marriage. We're looking at legal controls. Marriage. Each state has a set of laws pertaining to marriage. There are just some things you have to do, some things you can't do. Now, that wasn't true back in, 100 years ago, you see, when they pioneered this country. I'm talking about controls concerning getting married. You know, blood tests, certain age, people that the state might say are not mentally competent could not marry. Do you know laws like that? See, there are a lot of laws about who you can marry. Then once the couple is married, the relationship to one another and to the children is regulated, highly regulated by the government, the state. The regulation about marriage. Some states it's who you marry, until the Supreme Court passed the laws, whites and coloreds could not get married in many states. But once the marriage has taken place, then there are other controls concerning the family and the children. Let me give you some of these. The husband must support the wife and children. Now, we don't say that's bad. I'm just saying it is a law that you must. I don't think it should be a law, but nevertheless, you have to have law for lawless men. Husbands must support their wives and children. Another regulation, mothers must give proper care to their children and maintain a home. I mean, you can't live in a bus station if you have a child. They won't let you. So there are laws regulating that. Fornication and adultery are unlawful. You would never know it today in many respects, but it's still unlawful. You can still be put in jail for fornicating in public. Children are controlled. They must attend school and be subjected to the state's anti-God evolutionary teaching, and that's precisely what it is. There's no debate at all on that. Each state regulates divorce, where in the Old Testament divorce was granted by Israel. But there's no legal agency or church, or of course churches shouldn't be granting divorce, but those who believe in divorce cannot do it anyway. But if divorce were going to be granted, it shouldn't be the courts that do it. It ought to be religious people. I think, obviously, that in the long run you might have less divorce that way, but hear what I'm saying. The New Testament does not condone divorce. I'm saying that the state has taken over this right, or this activity. There are health laws. States require medical attention for the sick. If you don't believe it, you let a child get ill and go through a trial and try to stand fast on your faith. You'll find the state will move in right now. We've had the minister here written up in the paper more than once because of just idle gossip. So I don't know what they'd do if it really was the way they said. But the state requires medical attention, and you can't even die in peace if you don't have a doctor there to sign the death certificate. And anything unusual, well, if it looks a little unusual, then you have to have a coroner's inquest and autopsy and all of that. So the state controls you from the day you're born. Birth, of course, is controlled. There are regulations about birthing children and so forth. And then in old age, even in old age, you've got the state stepping in with Social Security and Medicare. Things that used to be the responsibility of the children or one's relatives, now the state has taken over that responsibility. So your life, dear friends, in the past, I don't know, say 50 years, 75 years, is regulated right from the time you draw a breath until you're ready to stop breathing. Now that's just a general survey of that fact, the control of the family by the state. You need to know those things in any study of family life from the Bible, because in the Bible you've got one attitude and the state has another. Now there are informal controls I want to mention. Those are formal ones. And informal controls can be just about as effective as legal controls of family life, marriage, attitudes, habits. See, wherever you live, whether it's the south or the north, the east, or in another nation, or in the islands, or wherever, there are certain social pressures that each area will place upon you. They're called mores and folkways of society, but there are certain social pressures that you have to conform to, or you're going to have a pretty rough existence. I mean, just to be a Christian among other Christians often can cause you trouble if you don't, have the pagan funeral and be sure you have a will all up to date and insurance and so on and so forth. So the pressures are there. Informal, you don't have to have those things, but their social pressures affect most people that way, and they submit to it. Fear of gossip or ridicule or rejection. Everyone wants to be accepted, you see. So informal controls are just as effective many times as formal ones. That's why people act the way they do. That's a whole subject in itself. People won't come to a barn to worship even though they're charismatic because, they're wedded to their denominational church at 4th and Broadway that costs $250,000 or $2 million and has a 300-foot steeple and a $50,000 organ, and they get entertained with a choir and so on. So pressures, conforming to the pressures. Now we come to still introductory matters tonight, to the purpose of marriage, the biblical purpose of marriage, and the foundations of marriage. What is the purpose of marriage? Well, some groups, some cultures, some people have one idea and some another. One purpose is procreation, according to Genesis chapter 1, verses 27 and 28. One purpose of marriage is to fill up the earth. And God created man in his own image. In the image of God created him, male and female created he them. God blessed them, and God said, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill up," not replenish, because the word in Hebrew is fill up. There isn't anything to replenish if it hasn't been there yet. But fill up the earth and subdue it. Now that's the only reason in some cultures and some religious groups sex is taboo for any reason other than procreation. And this is and was much more so the view of the Roman Catholic Church and Mormons, for example. Procreation. Another purpose in marriage, well, what would you say? For the expression of love, according to the Bible. expression of love. Now in America, this is about all it means. Scriptures say that in Hebrews 13:4 that marriage is honorable in all, and the bed undefiled. Hebrews 13:4. The God-given impulses are natural and given of God, but they are to be expressed in the way God intended. And how is that? In marriage, 1, and 2, not as an end in itself. That's why birth control and the pill has reduced marriage, reduced love to the physical act. And it's never an end in itself. And that results in, well, it's hard to know how much you can say in mixed company, but a lot of the problems I have to deal with and people have to deal with result from the fact that marriage in America especially has been reduced to love. In fact, you'll find Christians writing books saying that love is an end in itself. And love is not an end in itself. We just told you one reason for marriage, and that's procreation. That's the first one God mentions, by the way. But that isn't the only one. And when it becomes an end in itself, then it becomes boring, and you have to buy those $32.95 manuals that show you a lot of techniques and all of that, and then it gets reduced into perversion and sodomy and things that people are practicing and don't even know it's sodomy until you tell them. But if it's handled the way God intended, then it's not an end in itself. It's the way fully to express your love for one another in a physical way, but it's not an end in itself because love is more than the physical act. And that's the third purpose of marriage, companionship. Companionship. And that's the second thing we find in the book of Genesis that God says is the purpose of marriage, Genesis 2:18. And the Lord God said, "It is not good that man should be alone, and I will make for him an helpmeet for him." I will make a helpmeet for him. This is an inherent necessity. Now, we've covered this before in other subjects, so we don't have to repeat a lot of things, but remember the animal creation, that Adam could give names to all of them, and we're told he looked at them all, and there was not a one found that could be a helpmeet for Adam, verse 20. So he looked at all that. The jaguar, the thoroughbred horse, all of those things that didn't eat people in those days or run away from them, the beautiful bird, and all of God's creation, the Doberman, the German Shepherd. Adam looked at all of them, named them. And so there was no helpmate for him. And so he needed companionship. There was something in him that the animal creation was not answering that need. And so God caused a deep sleep to fall upon him, and God took out of his flesh one rib and closed up the flesh and made a woman out of it. And when Adam saw that, he said, "This is it." And so it's an inherent necessity. God saw that it was not good that man should be alone. That's God's opinion of it. So companionship is a necessity. And for love to be expressed merely as a physical act and make that an end in itself, that's why eventually people get bored in marriage and try to hunt up new mates and that sort of thing. So companionship. Now, why did God give him a wife? Because of procreation? No, that's one reason. It said because he needed a woman by his side. And then another reason, purpose for marriage, according to the Bible, it's the basis of the family and the home. It's the basis of the family and the home. See, without marriage, children would be without care, the love and protection, training, concern that parents can give them. Without marriage, children, well, it'd be like puppies, just they'd run the streets for themselves. And, of course, we've got a lot of that And marriage would, of course, not marriage, but the relationship between man and woman would simply degenerate into sex as an end in itself, without the responsibilities of the home and the family. Then this other would prevail, occur. So the purpose of marriage, it is the basis of the family and the home, which is the structure of society. This is what God is working toward. The relationship and the companionship and all of that, procreation, is for the purpose of building a family and a home, a structure of society there. The family is the smallest element of a society. You have a society and a family, a husband and wife, and then a third. You've got a little society going there. And the way God has made us, there is the care, the concern, the protection, the training, and all that you give that one in your little society that you couldn't give someone else's. Or if there was no permanent or firm basis, such as a home, for doing these things. And so when marriage and family break down, then you have all of these other troubles. Man becomes rebellious, he becomes a sinner. He's already a sinner, but I mean he becomes more sinful. Society breaks down. You have war, you have corruption, you have all of the things that are bad as a result of the breakdown of the family. Now the foundations of marriage. Foundations of marriage. Then next week we'll get right into some other things. Foundations of marriage. Biblical foundations. Well, according to Genesis 2 and Matthew 19, it's monogamy. M-O-N-O-G-M-Y. Monogamy means one man, one woman. That's the way God ordained it. Man has changed it. Now, there are a lot of problems and questions connected with divorce and remarriage and so forth. We're not entering into those now. We're simply laying foundational truths. Monogamy is the way God ordained it. Occasionally we run into concubines and more than one wife in the Old Testament. You don't see more than one husband, though some societies have it. I think that's called polyandry, where a wife has more than one husband. But anyway, monogamy is the way that God ordained. The Old Testament, some of them took other wives, and Moses permitted, God permitted, but it was not the way for the Christian. The Mormons, of course, you know, followed the example of Abraham and some of the others. Solomon followed Solomon's example. Matthew 19, Matthew 7. We'll be getting into that later. I'm just mentioning the fact now. Foundations of marriage. Monogamy, one man, one woman. Permanency. Permanency. P-E-R-M-A-N-E-N-C-Y. Death alone is to terminate the bond, according to Romans 7. Now we realize there is one biblical grounds for divorce, which we're not going into in this introductory study, but Romans 7, verse 1, Know ye not, brethren, I speak to them that know the law, how the law has dominion over man as long as he lives. For the woman which has a husband is bound by the law to her husband so long as he liveth. But if the husband be dead, she is loose from the law of her husband. So then, if while her husband liveth she is married to another man, she shall be called an adulteress. But if her husband be dead, she is free from that law, so that she is no adulteress, though she be married to another man. So Jesus in his teaching refers back in the Gospels to the original intention of God in the garden, which we'll get into later. But when the Pharisees asked him a question, why did Moses allow divorce? Jesus said in his answer, God in the beginning did not make it that way. Another foundation is fidelity. Foundations of marriage. Fidelity in both parties. That's especially necessary to say that today. Fidelity in both parties. Faithfulness in thoughts as well as actions. Right. Remember in Matthew 5 when we studied the principles of biblical ethics that Jesus said the lustful glance makes you as guilty as committing adultery. God one day will prove that Jesus knew what he was talking about at judgment. So we shouldn't kid ourselves that we are to be faithful in thoughts as well as actions. And it works both ways. You see, Romans 1 speaks of the women who got off, and we're certainly seeing that today, where women many of them don't even want to be married. They want to have as many affairs as they can, and women's lib, as we show in Every Wind of Doctrine, one of the things that they advocate as their right is to proposition men, where it used to be the man tried to seduce a woman. Now they think it's just as right for the woman. Well, of course, that same spirit that causes them to want to rebel against male leadership. For this cause, God gave them up to vile affections. Even the women change their natural use into that which is against nature. So that's the result of. Then love is another foundation of marriage. Love. Not just physical attraction, as we've said, but self-giving love. And husbands need to be admonished here more than the wives, because Ephesians 5 doesn't say, wives, love your husbands, although she is admonished to do that, of course. But the emphasis there, husbands, love your wives, as Christ loved the church and gave himself for it. So the kind of love a husband is to give a wife is self-giving love. The kind that Christ gave the church. A marriage without love is just two people living together. You can have a marriage certificate and be living together and be married in name only, just living together, like brother and sister. Another foundation, and I see my time's up, is headship. Foundation of marriage is headship. And it's the God-ordained way that God wanted headship in the beginning, in the man. For he said he first created the man and then woman for man to be his helpmate. And a woman is never happy or will be blessed, nor neither will a man until we restore the biblical roles. The headship in the Old Testament and New Testament is patriarchal. The authority is vested in the male as the head of the family. In America, it has taken two forms. It's not patriarchal, it's taken two forms. One is matriarchal, where the female heads the American home. That statement could not even be debated. That's so absolutely true, the sociologists are really concerned. So it's matriarchal, and another form in America is the democratic headship, so-called democratic headship. Marriage, we're told, increasingly being told by marriage counselors, marriage is sharing. Why? Well, the wife works, and as often as not, she does that to get free of the home. It isn't just to make more money, but to get free of the home responsibilities. And the husband must do the woman's chores because he expects her to work. If your wife works, it's a lack of faith. And mine did for a while, so you see, I'm not up here like I got born into the world perfect. But as our faith came to the place that we saw that wasn't faith, then she quit. And in fact, she worked 2 years longer than she should have because they wouldn't let her go, but she could have gone. I said, that you shouldn't even stay there. But that's been some time ago. But anyway, if she's going to work, it's a lack of faith, but if she's going to work and you don't have the faith, then you're going to have to do some of the household chores because she certainly can't do it all. So we're kind of mixed up. The headship in the Bible is patriarchal, not democratic. And that is not Bible. It is not a democracy in marriage. It's not a democracy in the home. It's not a democracy in the church. That isn't the way God ordained it. He ordained headship and loving submission to the head. Like we're to give to Christ, Christ gives to the Father. 1 Corinthians 11 tells us there's a right way. Children in loving submission to their parents. There's nothing wrong with submission, because eventually somebody's going to have to be submitted to you if you're a parent. And if your children don't submit, then you're going to be a part of the problem.